We're in the 172 on our way to the Macon County Airport in Franklin, North Carolina. This airport only has one approach. It's a circling only approach, the RNAV Alpha. It has a Category A minimum of 1586 AGL and 1 1/4 statute miles visibility. Fortunately, the weather is marginal VFR. It's 1900 broken and 5 miles visibility with the wind 260 at 10. So we can essentially use this approach to set up nicely for a normal pattern to runway 25. But how normal will this arrival be really? Take a moment to pause the video and brief this approach and see if you can spot where the gotchas might lie. Okay, the issue here is that although we are IFR, we do still need to comply with the rules for direction of turns in the traffic pattern. That's a regulation, it's not a suggestion. FAR 91-126 says, each pilot of an airplane must make all turns to the left unless the airport displays approved light signals or visual markings indicating that turns should be made to the right, in which case the pilot must make all turns to the right. Note that it doesn't make any exceptions for IFR. We're still required to comply with this rule on a circling approach. And note that runway 25 is designated as right traffic. So what looks like it would be a nice setup for left turns to runway 25 is actually not. So we can't just enter a left downwind. Instead, my plan is going to be to enter a midfield crosswind for runway 25. We'll be at 1600 AGL for that circling minimum, which is well above the normal pattern altitude. Given the terrain out there, we want to delay descending below MDA as long as practical, but we also need to descend early enough to get down to a reasonable position for landing using normal maneuvers. So where should we start that descent? The regs include 3 elements for when you can descend below MDA. One is the runway environment in sight. Number 2 is the required flight visibility. But the third thing that's relevant here is that we need to be in a position from which a continuous descent can be made using normal maneuvers. What normal maneuvers means is somewhat up to pilot's discretion, and it's going to depend on what you're flying. But clearly, we can't wait until we're on final here, or even base, because it'll be way too steep to descend from there. And even descending from the normal abeam point in the pattern would be a challenge to get down from 1600 feet without an extra wide pattern, which we don't really want to do in low visibility on a circling approach. So my plan here is going to be to start the descent just as we enter the midfield crosswind to try to reach that abeam position reasonably close to the altitude you would usually be at there. I wouldn't want to start much earlier than that because there is some terrain and some obstructions south of the airport. And no matter what, it's critical to remember that once we are below the MDA, the approach offers no protection, and we're relying on spotting things with our eyes out the window. We're at 7,000 feet, and we were cleared to cross Dale at or above 7,000 and cleared straight in RNAV Alpha to Macon County. That straight in part of the clearance might sound confusing on what's a circling only approach with no straight in minimums at all, but in this context, straight in just means that we bypass the course reversal. Technically, without that straight in clearance, we would have to do the course reversal. But in a situation like this, where we clearly don't need it for altitude or direction, it would be a good thing to clarify with ATC. But in my flight plan, I do have the hold. And since I don't want to fly it, I need to remember to delete the hold. Just tap on it and remove. Some GPS units will include the holding waypoint and then the hold and then the waypoint again as an exit point. And in those cases, it's usually best to go direct to the exit point rather than deleting the hold. The reason being, you preserve the hold just in case you end up needing it. And also often that first waypoint before the hold is coded as a flyover waypoint. And so you'll lose turn anticipation and overshoot the inbound course if you fly direct to that waypoint and delete what comes after. We're approaching Dale now, so I'm going to set my altitude pre-select for the next segment at 6,300, and I'll use vertical speed mode on the autopilot to manage the step downs here on this approach. Here comes the turn. Okay, and we'll go vertical speed mode. And just a few hundred feet per minute down. I'd prefer not to level off at 6,300 here. So I'm going to manage the vertical speed to be just above 6,300. And being just a little bit high is fine because we have plenty of time, 6 miles, to get down to 5,700 before the final approach fix. And I'm going to set the pre-select now down to 5,700 because we're going to comfortably clear the 63. And I don't want it to level off if I can help it. I can accelerate this descent a little bit. We'll go down to 500 feet per minute because I do want to get a level segment here in order to slow down a bit. I need to be below 90 knots to use the Category A minimums. The descent on the final segment is going to need to be a little bit steeper. We've got a bit over 2,000 feet to lose in 5 miles to the airport, and we'd actually like to get down well enough before the airport to spot it so it's not directly below us. So that's a bit better than 400 feet per nautical mile at 90 knots. I'm going to give it a good 900 feet per minute or so on the descent here. Mile to go. I'm going to set the pre-select down now to 3,700 feet. That's the increment, the first increment above MDA. And it should get us below the reported cloud bases by a couple hundred feet. Alright, there's the flip. We're going to go vertical speed mode. 900 feet per minute and reduce about 400 RPM for that descent. 1,000 to go and 3.2 miles to the missed approach point. The steep descent that's required here is definitely another gotcha. If we'd started down at a 500 foot per minute descent here, we'd have no chance of breaking out in time to see the runway. Starting to get some ground contact here. And I've got the airport in sight. Okay, I've got good visual contact here, so I'm going to start descending towards pattern altitude as we enter a midfield crosswind. There could be aircraft in the pattern here, and descending on top of the pattern, descending into the pattern is not ideal, but it's kind of our only way to work it here, so we just have to be extra vigilant. Gonna turn downwind. Right, and we're right at pattern altitude now.
500.
Of course, we're completely on our own as far as procedure goes here. We're below MDA. We're not really on the approach here. We're on the visual segment below MDA, just the same as we would be if we were descending below MDA on a straight-in approach. Pretty high final here, but that's okay. We're on target. Well, that worked out okay, but it's not hard to imagine how an approach like that might not work out okay, and it's a good idea to think about in advance what you would do if it didn't, because the published missed approach on a procedure like this doesn't protect you once you're below MDA or beyond the missed approach point. The AIM says that if you must go missed during a circle, what you should do is make a climbing turn toward the landing runway before joining the mist. In this case, that works reasonably well because the mist goes the way we were turning anyway. But imagine if we had entered a left downwind for runway 7 instead, and in that case, an early low southbound turn to try to join the mist could take us right into terrain. What I would do then is brief in advance that if we should have to go mist during the circle, we should continue the left turn to an east heading before intercepting the mist approach course. But going mist from a circling approach is never ideal, so the best thing is to just be absolutely sure before you descend below MDA, before you continue beyond a missed approach point, that the circle to land is going to work. There are some approaches where a circling restriction conflicts with the published traffic pattern. Take the RNAV runway 28 at Sandusky City, Michigan, for example, and suppose that you wanted to circle to runway 10. But circling is not authorized north of the runway, and that's where the left traffic pattern is. Is it reasonable to circle south with right turns then? You could cite the unless otherwise authorized or required clause of FAR 91-126. But since you could just fly the RNAV 10 here instead to a straight-in landing, it'd be hard to argue, I think, that circling with right turns is required. If that actually wasn't an option and you could truly only use the RNAV runway 28, then circling against the published traffic pattern will be a bit of a gray area. Whatever you do, just make sure that you don't conflict with VFR traffic in the pattern.